7th grade math, test 14 study guide. Problem number 1. So problem number 1 says the ratio of cars to trucks in a parking lot is 4 to 7. So that's 4 cars for every 7 trucks. And then it tells us how many trucks are there if there's a total of 440 cars and trucks. So the question they're asking us about is asking us about a trucks to total ratio. Well, we have a cars to trucks ratio. So I'm going to take my cars to truck ratio and convert it to a trucks to total. Well, there's 4 cars for 7 trucks. That means 7 trucks out of 11 cars and trucks. I had to add the 4 plus 7, right? And the reason I converted my ratio into this one is because of the question and the way it's worded and what they asked me to find. They want to know trucks to total, so I convert this to trucks to total. Now I can solve. They say how many trucks, so I don't know, so I put a variable for the part that's missing. And they say 440 total cars and trucks. So I write my proportion, I cross multiply, and then I divide. I'm dividing by the coefficient, and when I divide those I get 280 or 280 trucks. Number 2 says a company lowered the price of an item from $50 to $40. What's the percent of decrease? So this question is asking us $10 is what percent of $50? And the reason I know they're asking me this is because it decreased by $10. And so percent of decrease means find how much it went down by. In other words, subtract these two, and then answer the question, this is what percent of the original or old amount. So again, we use percent proportion for that. 10 is what percent of 50, so it goes is over of. That's how you know what number goes on top, right? It's not always a smaller number on top. Sometimes it's a bigger number on top. So then I cross multiply with proportions. 100 times 10 is that. 50 times x is 50x. Simplify that. 10 times 100 is 1,000. Divide both sides by the coefficient. Divide by 50. And 1,000 divided by 50 is 20. And since what missing was the percent part of the percent proportion, it's 20% decrease. Number 3 says you bought an item and paid 5.5% tax. The tax added $13.20 to the overall price. What was the original price? This question is asking us to figure out 5.5% of what number is 1320. So I use my percent proportion again. I know the percent is 5.5. It's is over of. So 1320 is 5.5% of what? That's why the x goes on the bottom this time. Cross multiply. 3.2 times 100 is just 1,320. Move the decimal 2 times, right? That's the shortcut. Divide both sides by 5.5. Remember, when you divide this over here, okay, we got to go in and out. There's a division. Pause the video, go out to the side, and make sure you get 240. And x is 240, and what was missing is the money down here, so it's $240. $13.20 is 5.5% of $240. So number 4 says write this fraction as a decimal, so I just divide in and out. Or if you look, 6 is half of 12, and you have that memorized, half of something is 0.5, you can do it that way also. 5 says if $4 item is 20% off, how much is taken off? In other words, you're finding 20% of 4. Again, we use percent proportion. Percent goes over 100, is over of. What is 20% of 4? That's why 4 goes on the bottom this time. We cross multiply again. 100 times x is 100x. 4 times 20 is 80. Now we divide both sides by the coefficient, by the number in front of x. Dividing by 100 is easy. Just move the decimal 2 times to make it smaller. 0.8 is 80 cents. 6 says we have to find 4/5 plus 1/5. When I'm adding fractions, I need a common denominator. I need the same bottom number. So if I look at my denominators over here, I see that 5. I look at the multiples of 5. 5, 10, 15, 20, etc. I keep going if I need to. And 2, multiples of 2. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I'm going to stop there because I want to use the first time or lowest first time the bottom numbers are the same, or lowest common denominator. So I want to make this 5 into a 10. So I multiply 4/5 by 2 over 2, because that'll give me a 10 on the bottom. But if I do it to the top also, it's the same fraction as 4/5. It just looks different. Same with 1/2. Another way to say 1/2 is, well, if I want it tenths, I got to multiply it by 5 over 5. So 4/5 is the same fraction as 8 tenths. 1/2 is the same fraction as 5 tenths. Now I can add them because I have the same size pieces, the same bottom number. 8 plus 5 is 13. We don't add the bottom numbers because that's the size of the pieces. And then if I need to, I can reduce. This is already reduced. If I have to, I can convert by dividing in and out. Number 7 says, a van travels 60 miles on 4 gallons. That's 60 miles over 4 gallons. At that rate, in other words, this is proportional. How much gas will it take to travel 135 miles? How many gallons, I should say, yeah. So I cross multiply. 60 times x is 60x. Oops, I forgot my x there. Let me fix that. 60 times x is 60x. Whoops. Okay. Well, the reason I forgot is because I'm just rewriting my proportion here without the units. So it's a good idea to take those out because we don't want to confuse those with variables, right? So I just leave the variable in there. So sorry I put that in there. I was okay before. So 60 over 4 equals 135 over x is the same as this. Now I cross multiply. 4 times 135 is 540. Divide both sides by 60. And I get 9. 9 gallons is the answer. So number 8, they give us a table. And they say, what's going to go here in that little question mark to make this proportional? Well, if it's proportional, these are all the same ratios. So what I can do then is I can take any point. I took the first one, and then take the one where the number's missing, and I just write a proportion, because they say, what would it be to be proportional? So I write a proportion. What's missing is the y value. I'll put y over x here, and I'll put y over x here. They should equal the same. So I cross multiply. 1 times y is just y. 21.8 times 3 is 65.4. Go out to the side and do that now. If you didn't get that, check to see what you did wrong. Number 9 says a line goes through the origin. That means it's proportional. This is also called direct variation. 1 point is 3, negative 3. Which equation could represent the line? Well, proportional equations mean we can take a shortcut to get the slope. Normally we'd use 2 points, right? But if it's proportional, we can use 1 point. I just put y over x and I have the slope. And the equations for proportional relationships are always the same. The y-axis is always equal to the x-axis times the rate of change or slope. So that should be the equation. So I take my point that they give me, I put y over x, and I simplify. I have a slope of negative 1. So I look for the equation that has a slope of negative 1 and has just a y and an x, or in this case a k and an m. It doesn't matter what the letters are. But if it's proportional, it's got to be a line. It's got to be a line that doesn't have any other exponents here or here other than 1. And it can't have plus or minus anything, because proportional means this. That's 0, right? It goes to the origin. So number 10 says, during a football game, the Rams gained 8 yards. Okay, that's plus 8. That's on the positive team. Gained 1 yard, that's positive. Lost 2, and then lost 2. So if I'm going to say what's the net yardage, what I'm going to do is add up my positives and negatives, and then opposite teams mean subtract. So the net yardage is positive 5. Number 11, we're going to write 15/100ths as a fraction. So the way we do that is we write it as 15 over 100. Then I do my factor trees and cross out my 1s, and my fraction will already be reduced. 12, which number below is equivalent to 8/5? Well, 8/5 is the same as 1.6. I divide in and out. It's also the same as 1 3/5, dividing in and out. There are no negatives, so it should be a positive answer. If I look at my options, 1.6, yep, that works. B doesn't work because a negative, that's 3. An odd number of negatives means a negative answer. This one's positive. So B doesn't work. C doesn't work. It's the right sign, but it should be 1 over 3/5, not 1 over 3/8. And D is 1 over 3/5, but it's the wrong sign again, so only 8 works. So for 13, we got to find a fraction between these two fractions right here, okay? So what we can do is we rewrite these fractions so they have a common denominator. And since I'm not adding these, I don't need the lowest common denominator. I just need any common denominator. So I'll take 30 and multiply this by 30 over 30. I'll take 25 and multiply this by 25 over 25. So 1/25 is the same fraction as 30/750. 1 over 30 is the same fraction as 25/750. And it's the same because I did the same thing to the top and the bottom. So I didn't really change this fraction, it just looks different. And a number in between these two, well, clearly 29 is in between 25 and 30, and the other ones are not. 14, I have to simplify this. 14 says, oh, actually I have to figure out what C would be to be equal to this. So let's just simplify this first. I'm going to do the rule for subtraction. So I have minus 1.4, so I draw 2 sticks. That would make these parentheses turn into brackets just because you don't put parentheses in parentheses. It starts to look dizzying. Now I distribute. 2.5 times 2, or 2.5 times 2 would be 5x. And 2.5 times negative 1.4. Remember, when you're multiplying decimals, pretend there aren't any. That's like 25 times 14, right? Which is 350. Then we count. There's one decimal, one more decimal. That's 2 decimals total. So I go to the answer and I go 1, 2 decimals plus negative. So in order for this to equal what C needs to equal that, it says 5x plus C. What goes there? What goes there is negative 3.5. We're going to simplify number 15. I'm going to do the rule for subtraction first. Add the opposite. Now, when I'm adding, I can use teams. Remember, opposite teams mean subtract. When you're adding or subtracting decimals, it's not like this where you pretend they aren't there. You actually have to line them up here. Here they're lined up by coincidence, but it's not necessary. Here it is necessary. There are more negatives than positives. That's why it's negative 6.8 inside there. And then I multiply 3 times negative 6 and 8/10, and I get negative 20 and 4/10. Remember, positive times negative is negative. So 16, we had to simplify or find this expression here. So I'm just going to add my x's together. 4x's and negative 5x's is negative 1x, which just means negative x. 5 plus 8 is 13. 17, we're going to simplify this expression. So I'm going to do my rule for subtraction first. I'm going to draw 2 sticks right here. Add the opposite. So now when it's necessary, I can use teams. So I'm going to go ahead and distribute. I copy this, copy this. 2 times negative 6x is negative 12x. 2 times 8.1 is 16.2. And then copy this. So I distribute first. Now I combine like terms. Constants are like terms with constants, so I add those 2. X's are like terms with x's, so I add those 2. So here's my calculations for those. If you don't get this answer, try it first and then check with mine. And there's the answer. Okay. So for 18, we're going to solve this equation. And we learned in class that if I have to do the inverse operation of division, I multiply. In other words, when the variable is on top, there's a number on the bottom, just multiply both sides by that number. That'll cross this out, and you'll get your answer. Multiply those 2, and you're done. 18, this time we have a fraction as a coefficient. So we learned in class that the way we divide by that fraction is to simply multiply by its reciprocal. So when I got a fraction in front of a letter, I take that fraction, flip it upside down, multiply both sides by that fraction. That will cross this out and isolate the variable. But now, in order to multiply fractions, we have to make everything a fraction, do our factor trees, cross out our ones here, and our answer will automatically be reduced or simplified. And the last problem, number 20, we had to solve this 2-step equation. So for number 20, we're going to work farthest away from the variable first. We're going to add 4 to both sides. And I did forget to do my rule for subtraction, add the opposite. So I see it's a negative 4 actually, not a positive 4. The opposite of that is positive 4, so that will cross those out. But I got to add 4 over here too to keep the balance, to keep it equal. Divide both sides by 8, and my answer is 7. Hope that helped.